Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Bear Down Ballers podcast here on the field of 68. I'm Ryan Wall, joined by Jordan Pollock. And Jordan, we just witnessed an electric Arizona versus BYU heavyweight college basketball matchup. Arizona came out on top. Their undefeated season continues. They move to 21 and 0 on the season to match their best start in program history. They won 86 to 83, beat BYU in Provo. Just an unbelievable game, a crazy ending. And although BYU gave Arizona a tough test, especially at the end, the Wildcats are still undefeated. What are your first thoughts today?
My first thoughts are this score outside of the last 2 minutes is not really telling of what this game was. Arizona was on a completely different level defensively in this game. It was super impressive, and we were talking kind of during the game, and you were mentioning the backcourt difference, which I completely agree. Berries and both Jaden Bradley played unbelievable games, combined for almost 30 each in this game. 29 for Berries and Bradley with 26. Just played out of their minds, and outside of maybe one kind of bad play that Bradley had in the last 40 seconds, like these guys played almost flawlessly on both ends of the court, defensively and offensively.
Yeah, before I get it, and we break down the backcourt for Arizona, their fantastic performance. I wanted to start towards the end of the game because Arizona in the last nine with 9 minutes left, they were up by 18. That lead shrunk and it continued to shrink. They were up by 13 with 4 minutes left. And just 64 seconds left, Arizona's lead was only at or was still at 11, but it kept dropping, and that was because Arizona was playing sloppy basketball. They were basically not trying to score. They were basically just trying to run down the clock on offense, and when BYU pressured them, it really got to this Arizona team. But Arizona showed once again that they can win close games, and even when things don't look great down the stretch, they still can pull it off. What were your thoughts on Arizona's lead just continuing to shrink there in the last 10 minutes of the game?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think sloppiness is probably the best word I would use for it because I don't really think BYU is really a super great defensive team, so it wasn't so much of BYU's like, wow, they played great defense. It was Arizona had some really costly and kind of boneheaded turnovers that they usually don't do, in just a really bad time in a really hard environment because just that little bit of momentum can really sway the crowd and like it did. And I also thought Arizona definitely in the last minute and a half were on the very bad receiving end of some very bad officiation in
Tell
this
me
game.
about it. Tell me about
And
it.
and I thought with those two things and in a road environment, that's really hard to come away from. And I thought they did a great job and how well they were responding, and especially in the last possession when Brayden Burries had arguably the play of the game when this guy just played his butt off. 13 to 14 from free throws, 29 points, a block in the last 7 seconds of the game when they're only up one. Like that's just absurd for a freshman to go on the road, one of the harder environments in the Big 12, and do it. It's just absurd.
Yeah, I want to get to berries a lot, but before I do, going through the last couple possessions for Arizona and some of those bad calls, as you previously mentioned, I want to touch on because Bradley got called with an off-ball foul when Arizona was trying to make an inbound pass, and then you had there was a couple possessions later, Bradley was or called with a jump ball foul, or BYU was called with the jump ball, and so then BYU got possession, and that's really when the momentum started going a lot in their direction, and both of those calls were just horrendous. I really think that the atmosphere, which was, to be fair, fantastic, at the home of the Cougars, it was really great. But I think that might have played a factor into it because they were getting a lot of calls thrown their way, and yeah, that the officiating needs to be better in this one. But getting to Brayden Burries, this was the Brayden Burries game. This was his best game as a college player. 29 points, as you mentioned, terrific shooting the ball. And he also added 13 free throws, 13 for 14 from the free throw line. And you mentioned it, the game winning block by Brayden Burries. Rob Wright went to the hole, and out of nowhere comes Brayden Burries with the block to win the game for Arizona. And he really continues to show that he can do it all. And on a stage where we saw so many elite players and elite freshmen, AJ DeBonsa, who was good, especially in the second half, wasn't the most efficient, still scored 24 points. And we saw Koa Pete on the floor. Brayden Burries was the best freshman on the floor, and Brayden Burries was the best player on the floor for 40 minutes throughout this game. It wasn't close. He has continued to prove that even as a freshman, he can elevate his game and elevate the team in the biggest moments. And I just continue to be blown away by Brayden Berry's performances, and especially this 29-point performance against BYU. What else did you think about the way he played in this one?
Yeah, I completely agree, especially some of the steals that he was making, just how big of a pest he was being on the defensive end. I didn't really think there was really any part of this matchup that I thought BYU was specifically better than, maybe besides the specific positioning with DeBonsa and who was going to pick up that matchup. And I was a little surprised earlier that they threw Pete immediately on him. And Pete did a great job defensively, and they would switch him occasionally. I know Krivos got a few possessions where he got switched on. I thought he played well, and even with Ivan Karchenkov, just a great performance again from him. And I know we've talked off the air about wow, like Karchenkov could be a guy like if he's here 2, 3, 4 years, like wow, like he could have a heck of a career. The way he's playing, I I don't know what NBA team wouldn't want him immediately. And so it kind of makes me sad to say that because I agree. Like, I would love for this guy to be able to stay in Arizona and kind of be one of the guys that develops and is around for a long time. But just how great of a defender he is. Like, I think that's just such a premium in the NBA. And I think that's a huge difference between him and, say, Azuolas Tubelis. Like, when he was super successful early in his career, it was like Tubelis just had a game that wasn't like he was majorly an offensive first player that didn't seem like it. Well, it hasn't made a transition into really the NBA, but Karchenkov's ability to play defense and shoot threes, I think is just what literally every single NBA team would want. So I would, at this point, the way he's been playing, I would be surprised if he is not going into the NBA in this offseason.
Yeah, Karchenkov was just spectacular in this one. 10 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, 2 blocks. And as you mentioned, he spent time guarding AJ DeBonsa, was really good. Another guy who guarded AJ DeBonsa and really used his physical ability, as I mentioned on him, was Toby Awaka. I love the way Arizona was defending him, and I think that's why he wasn't the most efficient in this game. And it really was just a complete defensive showcase from Arizona. They held BYU to 40% shooting from the field, 38% shooting from deep. And AJ DeBonta, as I mentioned, struggled shooting the ball, and so did one of their other top players, Rob Ryder, only finished with 7 points, 3 for 16 for shooting the ball from the field. Those two just couldn't get it going. The two guys that really were saving BYU were Kennard Davis and Richie Saunders, who combined in this game for 35 points. They were really good, but as expected, I thought that if Arizona could be physical against Bonsa, allow him to take and make him and force him to take tough shots, I really think that he would struggle a little bit. And I think that's what we saw. And as you mentioned, Arizona's they were just, all the players, everybody was just so defensively sound. They were so aggressive. They had their hands always looking for the ball. And another guy who was elite on defense but also brought on offense for Arizona, Jaden Bradley, just an unbelievable performance. 26 points. He made 10 shots from the field out of 15, finished with 3 assists, 3 rebounds, 2 steals in the first half. It was the Brayden Burries and Jaden Bradley show, and Jaden Bradley really was helping Arizona, especially on offense early, but throughout this game to stay afloat. And he is just such a great veteran guard, and we have continued to harp that Jaden Bradley and Brayden Burries are one of, if not the best backcourt in college basketball. And I think the national audience started to see more of that tonight because when those two guys do what they did against a team like BYU on national TV, it's hard not to give them their credit now.
Definitely, I completely agree. And there's such a great tandem with how great Bradley is in the mid range, almost Shea and CP3 esque. But just he just seems to knock down every single one of those contested mid range jump shots. They're both amazing around the rim. I know Barry's is a little bit more comfortable out on the 3 point line, but Bradley, if he's left open, he has no problem shooting that ball, and he's shooting at a lot better efficiency this year. And they even talked about that on the broadcast, which I really appreciated. And I think one thing, especially in this game, and we talked about how Pete was like a guy that didn't really seem like 10 points, like for arguably your best player on your team, like that's not really getting going. But the way this offense kind of moved and with just how well they were able to attack certain matchups, and I don't know if you noticed, but I felt like every single time Saunders was matched up against really anybody, either if it's a guard on the perimeter or a big inside, they're making a move to the basket and they're getting a shot off. And I was not really surprised with some of the run happening immediately after Richie Saunders fouled out of the game.
No, yeah, Richie Saunders, as I mentioned, he was the driving force for BYU throughout this game. And yeah, when he fouled out and when he was picking up those fouls throughout, their offense wasn't as good and struggled a lot. And Arizona, which has been a common theme, also struggled in their own right with fouls. Toby Awaka, Jaden Bradley, Koa Pete all had 4 fouls, and you had Krivas who had 3. Krivas only finished with 2 points, but he did have 8 boards and 3 blocks in this one. And you mentioned Koa Pete. He didn't have the best showing, 10 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, but he did have a big shot late to increase Arizona's lead. And I think that Arizona showed once again tonight that and that they don't need Koa Pete to be at his best every single night. They need the collection of the group to contribute, and it seems more than often that when one of, if not both, the Jaden Bradley and Brayden Burries are playing at an elite level, this team is just as elite and as good of a team as it gets in the country.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I would regret not making a statement. AJ DeBonta is a great player, but I thought it was a little insulting, especially in the second half of this game. It seemed like every single time he shot the ball, he was crying for a foul. And just the amount of unethical hoops that I've seen on the basketball court in the NBA, and now with a kid like this trying to do it in college, it kind of made me sick, especially in the last possession on the 3 point shot that he got fouled on when Brayden Burries is putting a hand up, stepping to the side, and DeBonta kicks his legs out sideways. Like there's nobody that shoots the ball in 2026 shooting their legs sideways. And for him to get a foul on that was just absurd. Every single time he's going up, he's an initiating contact and he's flopping away and expecting a call every single play. It's just absurd to me, and it got to a point where I'm just like this is sickening almost.
No, I totally agree. And AJ DeBonsa, yeah, some of his shot attempts, he was just doing it to draw a foul, and he wasn't taking the best shots. Obviously, his stat line suggests that he was 1 for 8 from three, 6 for 24 from the field. It just wasn't his best outing, and early on he did make a lot of tough shots, but it seemed like as the game progressed, he also disappeared throughout a lot of parts of this game, and I expected when the game got closer and down the stretch even more that they would go to him. They would go to him more often. He did try to, drive, and he missed a big layup in the final moments of the game. But it seemed like they were going to some of their other guys, Rob Wright, especially at the end there, to get a bucket. So, I mean, overall, Jordan, I think this was a great win for Arizona, especially on the road, beating BYU by 3 points. To me, I would I've liked to see Arizona put the game away sooner. Yes, they were, as we mentioned, they were up by 11 points with a minute and 4 seconds left in the game. So to only win by three when you look at it like that isn't the best. But all in all, escaping with the win is all that matters. Just like they did when they played at UConn. The end of that game wasn't pretty either, but they got the job done. What are your final thoughts?
I think my final thoughts are like I especially early in this game, like within the first 10 minutes when it's a 2 point game, I was sitting there saying Arizona's not really playing super well. And BYU had some crazy rolls, especially in the first few minutes of that game. And I know they hit their first two threes and then they didn't hit much for a while. But I was like, everybody I'm sure is looking at BYU's 3 point percentage and like they weren't shooting the ball and it's a game. And I was like, I didn't feel like there's any way at all where Arizona hit a peak in this game, especially when they're able to get a lead. I was like, they're doing well defensively, but I didn't feel like on the offensive end, like they got into a groove. But I don't ever feel like I saw Arizona of like, wow, this is the best that they're gonna play. Like I still think we haven't really seen that. And I think you could argue maybe UConn's probably the closest I've seen this team play to like that level, maybe even Florida. But I still think there's a lot left in this team. And meanwhile, like that's still like I still have not seen any minutes with Koa Pete at the five really at all this year in like a kind of death lineup. And so that's something that I think my mind really went to is like as well as BYU was able to come out of this game and carve up and I know Davis, they said Davis hadn't even like hit a shot since like Christmas. I don't know if they were just being overly sadistic to him, but like if this guy that hasn't scored in almost a month is scoring the third most points on your team, and it was an 18-point game at one point, and I don't feel like Arizona really got to a point where they were just rolling on both ends. I was like, this is scary for I think for the rest of the country.
I totally agree. Saying that, and I feel some of that same sentiment where you feel like Arizona still maybe hasn't played their best basketball, and yeah, that is a scary thought for everyone else in the sport because if they're 21 and 0 and they're beating every ranked team and anyone in sight, that was their sixth victory this season against a top 25 team for Arizona. Just unbelievable stuff. The rest of this season seems like it could be even scarier. But Jordan, before we get to our preview and predictions against Arizona State for their game this Saturday, I wanted to kind of rewind a little bit and talk about Arizona's 88 to 53 victory over West Virginia back on Saturday, January 24th. And in this game, it really was just it was a blowout kind of from start to finish. Arizona had a 20-point lead at halftime. It carried over into the second half. And once again in this one, Brayden Burries was Arizona's leading scorer, like he was against BYU. 22 points, 7 assists, 4 rebounds. He was one of four Arizona scorers in this game to have double figures. Anything stick out to you against West Virginia?
Yeah, I think you can just look at the box score, and I feel like that tells the entire story. Outside of the free throw percentage, which West Virginia beat Arizona in that, shooting 3 of 4 from the free throw line, to where Arizona was 16 of 23 and 70%. But everything else, like especially Arizona in that game, they hit some threes, which that's kind of been their Achilles heel, according to a lot of people around the country. But like this team was rolling. This really wasn't really a game much at any really point once Arizona got rolling.
Yeah, Koa Pete, 17 points, 7 rebounds, 7 for 9 from the field in this one. He had a really solid performance, and yeah, it just seemed like when he got going early, they kept feeding him, and he was efficient throughout this game. A guy who stood out to me that hasn't really been as consistent as we might have thought he was earlier in the year, but he had a solid performance in this game, and that's Anthony Del Orso. He finished with 12 points, only in 18 minutes, 4 for 8 from the field, 2 3-pointers. And this was his first game with at least 10 points since Arizona's game against TCU back on January 10th. And he's only had 2 games in double figures since January 22nd or December 22nd. So, as I said, he's been inconsistent, but this was a good showing from Anthony Del Orso. And yeah, when he gets going early and he hits a couple of shots, he really gains a ton of confidence.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that can be such a big thing, especially coming off the bench for a guy that for his first threat to do is to shoot the ball. And if you're getting guys to have to cheat and put up a step in your counters to be able to get downhill, and he's a really good finisher around the rim when it's not completely crowded. That when his shots falling, he definitely has the advantage in a lot of the matchups.
Yeah, this game against West Virginia played out pretty similar to I think we believed it would. But moving on, Jordan, I wanted to get into Arizona's next game, and that is on Saturday, January 31st, against the Arizona State Sun Devils. It's taking place in Tempe, 12 p.m. local time, 2 p.m. on the East Coast. It's on TNT, so another national TV game against the Arizona Wildcats' biggest rivals with Arizona State. Arizona State's coming off of an 82 to 68 victory over Cincinnati, their first win since January 10th. And since they lost to Arizona on January 14th, ASU has gone 1-2. How do you see this second matchup between the two teams playing out?
Yeah, I also really quick wanted to talk about one thing I wanted to talk about the last time Arizona played against ASU was the fact that, especially in this rivalry, it seems that every single time in so far in the Big 12, which is the second year in the Big 12, this game has been played in Tucson. The national TV media people, whoever assigns and schedules the games, whenever it's in Tucson, they'll put it in the middle of the week, late night, not really national TV. Like I'm assuming like Arizona will probably win by a blowout. Like let's just put it to where like the Arizona fans will turn the game on. But if it's at ASU and there's a chance there could be an upset, cool. We're gonna put it on Saturday. We're gonna put it prime time in the middle of the day. Like nobody has to do anything crazy. And also mind you, so far in this month, outside of last Saturday against a West Virginia team, first year with that head coach, every single one of their major games have been on the road on a Saturday. Tonight's game late on a Monday night. Like
On the
it's
road?
it's yeah, it's just interesting. I know it's hard. Like you don't want to like be specific about okay, like we don't know if Arizona is going to be the number one team in the country, and the schedule's kind of already set. So at that point, it's like okay, they're really good. Like we can't really change the schedule, but the fact it's still the number one team in the country and like they're not really anywhere close to getting primetime games is just kind of absurd to me. Um,
Yeah. Uh,
Go
no,
ahead.
were you going to finish your point?
Go ahead.
Arizona, I was going to say, has won 6 straight games against ASU. The last time Arizona lost to ASU in Tempe happened in 2020, January 25th, 2020. It was 66 to 65. And yeah, this matchup, as we've talked about in the past, has been as one-sided as it gets. And yeah, I think it's going to be just that once again. And Arizona State only lost by 7 points to Arizona a couple weeks back, but I think it's going to be more this time. I think Arizona, they're coming to Tempe following a big win over BYU. I think their momentum continues. I got Arizona winning by 15 points over ASU. I don't think this one will be as close. And I think when Arizona gets that lead, I don't think they're letting ASU anywhere close. I think they will finish them off. What's your final prediction, Jordan?
Yeah, I agree with you. As blessed as I was to be able to go to this game when it was in Tempe a season ago, the crowd is hostile, but it's a lot more of a neutral site kind of hostile that just kind of hates each other. Like I think it was more like 60-40 ASU to U of A. And so that just brings a different kind of juice for any team. And I'm really excited to see how this team kind of responds to it. I know last year it for some reason I specifically remember Carter Bryant really being really great in that game. And I would love to see kind of like an Ivan Karchenkov have like a 20-point game in a game like this, who's really kind of taken it up with being like a wildcat, and he's really had a lot of fun games in front of Zona Zoo. Like I want to see like a guy like that like take this rivalry to a new level and have a great game, and just another guy for ASU fans to hate. So I agree with you. I think Arizona will win this game. I could see it probably getting to double digits. I'm not gonna lie, but I'll probably be safe and say I'd probably give Arizona 7.5, 8.5 point spread.
Sounds good. Arizona has won 11 of their last 12 against Arizona State. And as much as it pains me to say this rivalry is hanging on by a thread, it's barely alive because it's been so one-sided. But hopefully we could maybe see it be a game like it was a couple weeks ago. I think Arizona's going to win by 15. You think they're going to win by a little bit less. But all in all, Arizona has continued to roll. They're at 21 and 0, tying an all-time record for their program, and they can break that and move to 22 and 0 for the first time in program history against their biggest rival, Arizona State, on January 31st. Arizona beating BYU by 3 points was an unbelievable victory. Arizona once again showed that they're a level above the rest of the competition. That's all we have time for today. He's Jordan Pollock. I'm Ryan.